And now our host, Stephen Lee Morris.
Paul Spera is an American actor living in France. He grew up in New York among a family of attorneys. These would include his mother, his father, and his sister. His grandmother is the late US Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. In this episode, Paul discusses the influence his grandmother had on him, his decision to become an actor, his decision to move to France, and the French funding system and its support of artists in comparison and contrast to the system in the United States. Paul joins us from his home in Paris. Paul Spera, welcome to Animal Farm.
Well, thank you. I love the show. I'm very happy and honored to be here.
This is a show about art and politics, and you're involved in both. Well, you were involved primarily in art as an actor. You were born in Paris just for a flash before your family brought you back stateside. You grew up in New York. Mm-hmm. And then you studied at Yale in your undergraduate work, and then immediately decided to make a career in France. And rather than the United States, you had mentioned that the options presented to you, the viable options, seemed to be New York or Los Angeles to become a professional, a thespian of some sort or another. And you said you chose neither of those, and you decided to go back to Paris, where you had some connections even growing up, as you had mentioned. I'd like to go in sequence and start with your growing up, simply because you have a family of lawyers, one of whom was a Supreme Court justice. That's your grandmother, and your sister is an attorney. Your mother is an attorney who teaches at Columbia. And I just
my dad too. He's retired, but
your dad's
he's a retired attorney.
Yeah. So. Tell us a little bit about growing up and why, in good heaven's name, you would be such a rebel and decide to go into the theater instead of into law.
Well, I was lucky enough to have a sibling, so I guess I figured she could take over the law side. And my uncle actually is with my mother's brother. He's a classical music producer. Though he did go to law school. I didn't even go to law school. But so, maybe we have in each generation one black sheep. I'm just kidding about that. Because I didn't feel like it was particularly rebellious in that I wasn't presented with too much resistance from the rest of my family. No, they were very supportive. They always have been. And I like to say that I think there are a lot of things in common between the legal profession and acting, because they are text-based professions, right? So lawyers and judges, they're all about interpreting text, and so are we. Though I feel like we're a lot luckier because our texts are, can be written by amazing authors, but they can also be non-verbal. They can be movement or song or music or dance or silence. But we're still, about interpreting text and bridging something, being a bridge somehow between something that was written, however you want to define written, and an audience that's going to receive it somehow.
And the pressure of persuasion is profound in both, really. You have to the argument has to win the day if you're a lawyer, and the emotion has to win the day. You have to be credible, or you're not taken seriously as an actor.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose lawyers are supposed to control their emotions, but so are we. You can't just be flailing around with any old kind of emotion in any time. So no, there are a lot of things in common, and when I was growing up, I guess I was very sensitive to the written word, and to text, to languages. Also, I grew up bilingual, speaking French and English, so that is a huge gift. Any parents out there who speak more than one language and are wondering whether they should raise their kids bilingual or trilingual or whatever, I would say definitely go for it, because it's a wonderful thing. And also, yeah, reasoning, I guess, reasoning, arguments, logic, all those building blocks of lawyerly activity was always around for me in my childhood, and I'm sure that influenced somehow my my attraction to the theater and to telling stories. A lot of, you know, case law. It's also all about stories, right? With my grandmother, we would often talk about, you know, different cases. She never revealed information she wasn't allowed to, I will say.
Oh, that's
we,
so
we
disappointing. That is so disappointing to hear, but.
Well, I don't know what I would have done with it. Maybe she did, but I can't tell you. Yeah. So, but what I remember from that is that it was always just like storytelling, basically, you know. And what was cool about it was because they were cases that maybe hadn't been decided yet. It was kind of like those old choose your own adventure books. Yeah. In that you were presented with a story, but like, how should this story end, or how should we evaluate this story?
Yeah. So, yeah. How much contact did you have with your grandmother growing up? Were you close, or was she? Would you say she was an influence, or how? They're all busy people, being a lawyer, a family of lawyers. That's true. How much time was actually spent, and what kind of influence did she have?
I learned a lot from her in many ways. We spent, I would say, a lot of time together, given the fact that she had a very demanding job, and we didn't live in the same city either, because I lived in New York and she lived in Washington. But we always spent Thanksgiving and New Year's together, and often other holidays. And sometimes I would go on like vacation with just them, just my grandparents, which was really exciting because they got to stay in like really cool places. I think that's one of the perks of being a Supreme Court justice. And but I learned a lot. Well, what I was just saying about, you know, storytelling and reasoning and like picking at what the salient and important parts of the story are, but also, you know, my grandmother she really knew how to command attention, like in a room, even though she had a pretty diminutive stature and was soft-spoken. She was somebody who, you know, she just knew somehow, I don't know if innately or if it's something that came with experience, but, you know, when she was there, people would just have to adapt to her rhythm, but it's always seemed to just happen naturally, you know. And so, and she, you know, tended to take things a little slower maybe than most people. She ate very slowly, would speak. She was, you know, if you've ever seen her in a talk or even in a speech, yeah, she had her own pace, and she knew how to dress. She knew a lot of things, and that, yeah, I think those were important influences.
Here's a highly speculative. I have a highly speculative question. If you can imagine growing up without her in your life, how could you imagine that decisions you made, or even a kind of moral or ethical compass, might have been different, might have been changed? If you could imagine that, and that's highly speculative, I know, but.
That's a difficult question to answer, because I suppose I wouldn't be the same person.
Well, that's kind of the answer.
So what kind of person would I be? I don't know.
Well, maybe it's more easy than you would be a different person. What was it she instilled in you that made you who you are today? Either a value system or a certain way of doing it. You mentioned she was very slow, she was very methodical, she captured a room.
Yeah. I think part of that is because she had she had a sort of assurance, not just self-assurance, but an assurance, a kind of faith, I think, in certain systems. And I mean, she was very convinced that, for example, you know, the American Constitution and sort of the American society, despite many shortfalls, was kind of inherently worked, or like could work, that the concepts and the values and the principles were all there. And I think from her own experience, she went through a lot, and was sort of victorious and triumphant in the end. So I think that I think I learned from her a sort of self-assurance, but nothing to do with like cockiness or anything, or braggadociousness. I don't know if that's a word, but sort of a calm, okay, let's concentrate and believe that things can function and work out if we kind of concentrate and just work on it and stay focused, basically. So that's one part of the answer. The other part of the answer is, I think that, of course, as a young man, having such a strong female influence in my life was very important. But also, there are a lot of strong women in my family, my mother as well, my sister as well, my aunts as well, I'm pretty much everybody. But, you know, I went to like all boys prep school. I think that if I hadn't had those strong influences, that might have, I might have turned out different in that environment, for example. So yeah, no, it's difficult to evaluate what exactly, you know, what part of me today is due to her life and her influence, but I'm sure a lot, and I'm sure I'll be rediscovering that like through the rest of my life. So
there's a lot of there was a lot of hindsight commentary on the time they were rushing to replace her on the Supreme Court, in that rush, that had she chosen to resign during the Obama administration or earlier, that she would not have afforded the opportunity for the Trump administration and the Republicans in command at that time to rush that through. Was that discussion being heard in your family at the time, and was there discussion of it? Or did she really consider that?
I don't know. We didn't really talk about it. I don't know that how seriously she considered that. I don't really like that. I understand that those kind of remarks or that analysis. I don't like it because I feel like we shouldn't blame her for the dysfunction in our system that makes it. Obama wasn't able to get Scalia's replacement. Merrick Garland confirmed either. So
that's right.
It's all.
It requires you to be like a master strategist with almost godlike vision to be able to make responsible decisions, trying to suss out. You have to be a prophet.
And that's not supposed to be. That's not supposed to be her job, or the job of the justices on the court isn't supposed to be that kind of strategizing and sort of political gamesmanship, or that's not really their mission.
Right.
And I think she took their mission very seriously and literally.
Now, the last question on this theme before we move to the acting profession is that your sister is an attorney and was quite outspoken during that time about particularly relaying the message of her wishes that the new appointment not be rushed through. So let's just put it that way, that a new administration be allowed to make that appointment. The question is really about your sister. What is she up to now? She is a practicing attorney. and she's
She
had.
is, yeah. She works with the right now. She works with the ACLU, as my grandmother did when she was a young woman, and she works for the reproductive justice.
Lovely.
Oh, I wanted to say one thing,
Yeah.
but maybe this will allow us to sort of bridge the subjects, because I happened upon this quote from Bertolt Brecht, and I just happened upon it the other day, and it made me think of my grandmother and some of the debates that have circulated around what the Supreme Court justices do and think and say. And the quote is this: "There's he makes a list of things that actors should avoid doing." And so one thing on the list is an actor should avoid subordinating his or her, let's say subordinating their own experiences and observations to the presumed intentions of the playwright. I hope that makes sense. So basically, they shouldn't put what they presume the playwright's intention to be over. They shouldn't prioritize that over their own observations and feelings and experience. And that makes me think of this form of legal reasoning that some of the more conservative judges use, which they call originalism, which is kind of the idea that we should just interpret the law like the way it was written in 1791 or whatever. And these sort of, and how impossible that is, really, to imagine that we know, that we can presume what exactly the intentions of those writers, those founding fathers were, and that maybe our experiences and observations of today are more valid in some way. Anyway, I think my grandmother was more on the Brechtian side of.
That is a wonderful. That's a wonderful bridge. No, that's a wonderful bridge, and leads us into the question. Thank you for that. It leads us into the question of you have just graduated from Yale as an undergraduate, and you have all kinds of options open to you. And
we're going back in time.
We're going back in time.
I graduated a while ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, this is a fictional scenario in the fiction of your youth, let's say. Except it's
okay. So let's set the scene.
Set the scene.
Graduated.
You've just graduated, and you can go to New York. You obviously have an affinity with the theater. You can go to New York. You can go to Los Angeles if you want to really sort of underscore a career in film and television. And you chose Paris instead. What was your thinking? And then let's talk about what happened when you got there.
Sure. So there were a number of things that went into that decision. So first of all, I've had a long connection with France because I was born here in Paris. My parents are American, and we moved back to New York, where I grew up when I was a baby. I was not born a French citizen, actually, because when you're in France, just being born here, if your parents are foreign, that doesn't make you automatically French, unlike the US. So I was naturalized French a few years ago, but I was born here, and my parents lived here for a while. That's why I was born here. They weren't just like on vacation or something. And they really did everything they could to make sure I would grow up bilingual. So my mom actually spoke to me in French when I was a kid, even though French is not her mother tongue. And so I thank them for that every day. So I had the language, and I'd been to France on, holiday quite often. As I was telling you before, actually, there was one year, like my second grade year, where we lived in Paris because my mom had a sabbatical and she was teaching here. So I went to school for a year. Anyway, I had a connection with France and the French language and the culture and the society for a while. And I had seen some very incredible performing arts here, not just from French artists and companies, but companies from all over Europe and really the world, because just lots of people, when they go on tour in Europe, they'll come to Paris. So Paris was in my mind as like a locus of performing arts. And And when I was finishing my undergrad degree, George W. Bush was still president. We were like well into his second term, so he'd been president for a long time, too long, in my opinion. And I remember the Iraq War had been something of a political awakening for me as a teenager. I'd participated in some of the protests in New York, and I was really sad and kind of disillusioned to see that war happen despite, you know, so many people's better judgment. And I guess that was all kind of going on. And I wasn't in a rush to move back to New York City where I'd grown up. And I think I realized at some point, like I grew up in New York City. I went to prep school, then I went to an Ivy League college. I'm not really ready to like go back to New York and pretend to be an actor. Like I don't think I've lived enough and like seen enough, you know. And Los Angeles, I didn't drive at the time. I don't know, it kind of scared me. Living in a place where you have to have a car. So I thought, you know, I guess I was, you know, 21, and I thought, hey, this might be the time to try and live elsewhere. And so France was kind of an obvious choice because of the reasons I've already mentioned. And then I was very fortunate because I was offered a spot at the National Conservatory here in Paris. So I was able to sort of finish my training here, and that was great. I really enjoyed my time there. And then when I got out, I started working pretty quickly, you know, small things. I realized that there was a lot of dynamism in sort of younger companies. I worked with a company of classmates of mine for a couple of years. And I also realized that, it didn't seem too difficult to make a living from this profession without having to work a very demanding day job, doing something that I wasn't particularly interested in just to make ends meet, because there is a lot of support here for the arts and for artists. So put all those things together, that, you know, and then, you know, one thing leads to another. I would sort of correct something you said earlier in the episode when you said that you said something along the lines of that I decided to make a career in Paris. And at the time, it wasn't really like a decision to go make a career. It was just, I was really taking it one month at a time. But yeah, but you know, but then things seemed to be working. And I mean, it helps that Paris is a city I really love. I think it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, and there's so much here. And the other thing about living in Europe is that, you know, Europe and the Mediterranean region, it's kind of small. I mean, there's just like a concentration of people, cultures, languages, artistic schools and styles. And so that was very exciting. So I just never left.
And you say there's support for artists. There's legislation rolling through California right now as we speak that's attempting to provide a similar kind of support. What is it? How does it work in Paris? Because I would assume, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming that employment on the stage is sporadic, and that if you did not have support, you would need to be working as you say, some other profession, either as a teacher or as a waiter or whatever, or working. Well, you say doing something that didn't interest you in order to make ends meet, I think is the way you put it. So how does it work in Paris where you can avoid that and you can actually make a living, even if it is a modest one?
Well, so the main support system for artists, sort of direct support system, is through the unemployment insurance system. Yeah. So there's a nationwide unemployment insurance system for everybody who's seeking employment, that you essentially qualify for, you know, depending on how much you've worked. And then when you're out of a job, you get direct payments basically to help you while you're looking for work. So, but there's a sort of special, I guess, carve out for performing arts workers, not just artists, but also technicians.
Here we go. And this is the big difference between the state unemployment system that we have here and the national system they have in France. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the way it works, and by the way, the unemployment system is paid for by everybody's salary. So there's everybody who ever gets a salary, there's a payroll tax that goes out, and that goes towards funding the unemployment insurance. So it's not like the state that's paying into it directly from income taxes or sales taxes or whatever. And so it's sort of a built-in like solidarity between workers kind of situation, because every time you work, you're automatically paying into this system. And so for workers in the performing arts, essentially that unemployment insurance is pretty generous, though I don't like to use that word because it makes it sound like we're getting a gift, when it's something that a lot of people a few generations ago really fought hard for, and that people are continuing to fight to make sure it stays, because of course with neoliberalism they always and austerity they always want to cut into that. And so essentially, if you work a certain amount every year, you qualify. And
for an actor, how much? If I could dig in, for an actor, how much is that? How much do you need?
Okay, so the calculation is a little bit complicated because it's technically 507 hours, but an hour is.
Who came up with that? 500.
Well, it's even okay. We have. I mean, this is like the country of insane bureaucracy. It has to be said. I mean, I think we're rivaled and surpassed only by the Germans in that. But yeah, it's 507 hours. But the great thing is, an hour isn't necessarily an hour.
Only in France. Only in France.
because if you have a performance. Yeah. So there's a distinction that's made between, for example, like rehearsals and performance, or any other kind of work that's not performance. If you have a performance, let's say you're performing in a show and it lasts an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever, but that counts not as 2 hours but as 12 hours. So every performance is counted as 12 hours. Okay. I mean, I really don't want to get into the weeds of the labor support system in France, but how do they come up with that? I couldn't tell you exactly how they came up with that, why it's 12, and also it used to be 8, then it became 12. There was a time where it was like if you had like more than 3 days of performance in a row, it was only 8 hours. But then if you had like one performance here, another one over there, it would be 12 hours. I mean, it's kind of insane. I think that the idea is that when you have a performance, there's a lot more work that goes into it than simply showing up, at the theater. And then going on stage.
So are they calculating rehearsals into that, or are you?
It depends. I mean, there are a lot of companies that won't have enough money really to pay for rehearsals, or not to pay for, won't have enough funding to pay for all the rehearsals that actually happen. So in a way, that's to compensate a little bit for that.
I see.
Some very well-funded companies will be able to pay you, every hour of rehearsal that you actually had. But then there's you have to learn your lines at home. You have to the idea is there's a lot of work that goes into a performance beyond just the however much like stage time there was. And the whole philosophy of the unemployment scheme for performing arts workers is that we're perpetually unemployed. So we're actually we're considered, whereas most professions, you go on unemployment when you don't have a job, and then when you find a job, you sign a contract, and then you're not on unemployment anymore. We are always on unemployment. So we're considered basically perpetually unemployed, and then sometimes we do work. So you're not paid unemployment benefits when you're working. You have to, at the end of each month, you have to declare. Yeah. They check, and now most of it is automated, so they'll get the paperwork automatically. But you have to declare how much you worked this month, and the days that you didn't work, you're entitled to a benefit. And so that makes it that you can make a living wage, basically. And of course, how much your benefit is depends on how much you've been making. So the more you make, the higher your benefit is. Yeah. But like, for example, for me right now, this year, if let's say next month I didn't work a single day, I would receive, I think it's something like 1,600 euros. And that's not bad. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, then there's also, of course, the cost of living is different here maybe than it is in certain American cities, etc.
Is it rhetorically strident to say that, to argue then that this entire system is predicated on the assumption that artists are essential workers, as opposed to the...
well, the French especially are very keen on that, very serious about that, about culture being essential, about culture being like the bedrock of the society, about artists being essential workers. Now, during the COVID lockdowns, there was actually quite a lot of contestation. Is that a word in English?
Contesting, yeah.
Contesting, of protest, because the theaters were shut down, and so there were actually like occupation movements of several important theaters in Paris, but also elsewhere, where theater workers, basically went and did sit-ins to say we should reopen, of course, with health protocols and everything, because we did reopen in last year, in the fall. We reopened for about 2 months.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a single cluster or anything. And, there with strict health protocols, you have to wear masks, there was social distancing. I think the theaters were at half capacity or maybe even less, depending on the size of the theater, et cetera. Yeah. And so it worked. And it's true that the government had a hard time explaining why exactly that they should be shut down. The main explanation they gave, or the sort of one that they thought was most convincing, was, well, yeah, but even if it's safe inside the theater, the cinema, or the, wherever it is, but people then congregate outside before and after, and in the street, and then there are a lot of people just kind of out. So anyway, but yeah, this notion of essential, of culture being, and the arts being essential is huge. And it's fun. I remember when I moved to Paris and I was at the conservatory, and I was, just sort of comparing notes with my friends, and I was learning so much about France and about the system here, and a lot of things that blew my mind. And it blew their mind, for example, that we don't in the States, we don't have like a culture ministry.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we have National Endowment of the Arts, and there are things, but the sort of Ministry of Culture here is super important. They have a notion that they call politique culturelle, which doesn't mean exactly like political culture, but it means how would you explain that? Basically that there is a politics of like how to deploy culture, that basically that the state should have a notion of how culture is being like deployed. Is support going to big cities, to small towns, to regions? Is it all centralized? This is all part of the notion of like the politics of culture. Basically, it's not like politicization of culture. That's not what I mean. Yeah. And my friends in France, like they couldn't. They were like, how is it possible you guys don't have that? And the thing that really blew my mind, though, is that when I was at the conservatory, it's that this is free. It's a national school. It's a public school. It's like $0 tuition. Mm-hmm. And there, the year that when I got there, they had just changed the director it was a new director of the school, who was actually a theater director, who had a long career, but was a little bit considered by my generation like a little bit has been. But he had been a teacher there for a long time, and he ended up becoming the director of the school. And he was changing up a lot of things in terms of the curriculum and just the way the school worked, and a lot of young actors, students were not happy about it. And so basically they decided to like go on strike, like a student strike for like 3 days or something. And like basically we didn't have class, and we all just like sat, you know, in the big theater in the school, and like talked and had assemblies, and were like, you know, making demands and everything. And I was like, wow, I couldn't imagine something like this at a place like Yale, even though it's like where I went to undergrad, even though it's like quite kind of, you know, left of center in terms of most kids' ideology and stuff. But I mean, I don't know, just the fact that people are paying so much to go to school, so that the idea that we would like go on strike and like miss a few precious classes, it was wild. And no, but they were like, and their attitude was, no, on the contrary, this is like a public institution, so we have like
we own it. We own it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
we own
yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly that was exactly their attitude. And I would say that that's something kind of in France is like very prevalent in kind of all sectors, actually.
Very, very interesting. I just want to close with snapshots of what kind of performances you have done. Well, I suspect we're obviously going to go pre-COVID. So in the year or two before the virus hit France, what were the kinds of plays you were in? Where were they at? And what was your life like? What was your professional life like?
Well, I'd be even more excited to talk about what I'm doing now, because that way I can do a little bit of promotion, and because it's fresh in my mind, and because things. Oh, I don't think I mentioned on Wednesday, this Wednesday, so in a few days, our cinemas, performance art spaces, museums, galleries, and outdoor dining are all reopening.
Yeah.
So it's very exciting. And
may I hit a pause in there and just back up for a moment, because I think there was a point you were making that we never actually got to, and that you said they reopened in the fall.
Oh, yeah, well, we did.
And then what, was there another wave, or did they stay open, or what?
No, we locked. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh, yeah, you went into another lockdown.
We went into a new lockdown in, I think it was early November. Yeah. And we've been in that ever since, basically.
Yeah, that's what the point I wanted to underscore.
Yeah, you're right. We didn't. Yeah. I didn't finish that thought.
Yeah. So now go ahead. What are you doing now? And then we'll go back to how is it different or similar to what you have been doing in the past?
Well, so one of the kind of odd things about the second wave and the second lockdown, because in the lockdown back in spring 2020, you couldn't do anything, basically, but then in the lockdown that started in the fall, and that's basically been going on uninterrupted, for us, for example, performance arts workers, we've been allowed to rehearse but not perform. So because we can't, basically we have not been allowed to you know, gather large groups of people, audiences, and do proper performances. But we've been allowed to work and rehearse. And so spaces have been open for rehearsals, for residencies and things like that. Also, film shoots have been reauthorized for a while. So there's been shooting going on, a lot for TV, especially because, you know, right now everybody's in front of their TV with their screen. So that makes it that, like, we're about to reopen, and I've been quite fortunate because I have a few projects that I've been able to continue working on or even start working on during the pandemic. And so now there's a few things that are going to happen sort of back to back. So right now, starting this week, for the next 2 weeks, I'm in a residency actually here in Paris for a new project that I'm co-writing and co-developing with a friend of mine who's a stage magician. Magician, and it's sort of an interactive, immersive piece that takes place in like a trade like a trade show for professional executioners. So we're in like a kind of parallel alternate reality where public executions are still a thing. I know they're still a thing in some parts of the world, but let's say in our part of the world that they're still a thing. And basically the audience is our professional executioners who come to this trade show, and then there's a lot of magic and things, you know, sort of an Addams Family aesthetic, let's say. Yeah, you're right to laugh because the idea, it is supposed to be funny. And that's something, it's actually, it's a street theater show. So we're going to be presenting it at a big street theater festival in August in a place called AURILLAC, which is sort of near Lyon. And then I'm going to Naples, and I've been working with a Neapolitan director she's based in Paris, but she's from Naples, and we're working on a very free contemporary adaptation of the Orestes myth. And so the piece is called Orestes Will Be Back, and it touches on themes of generational resentments. Of course, Orestes, for those of you who don't remember, kills his mother. So
with his sister's help, yes.
With his sister's help. But it's almost more of like a performance art. It's interdisciplinary. There's live music. There's I rap in it, which I don't. It's the first time. I'm not like a rapper, but I wrote some rap lyrics, and I ended up now I'm gonna rap in it, and it's pretty cool. We're doing it in Naples in a museum that's like the fashion museum, which is a great place. They have these mannequins sort of all over the place, which we're going to be able to play with. And then I'm going to be shooting in a film, which I don't think I'm allowed to talk about, but it's a feature film, and I play the bad guy. That's going to be shooting in a studio here outside Paris. And then there's the Avignon Festival in July, where I'll be doing a play by a French writer who is a little bit known in the English-speaking world. He's been translated. His name is Bernard-Marie Koltes. I don't know if you are familiar with his work. He's, in my opinion, one of the best playwrights in French for sure, but I think even just straight up one of the best playwrights of the second half of the 20th century. He died of AIDS in, I think, the 90s. He was really active in like the 70s and 80s. Mm-hmm. And this is a play which has been translated in English. We're doing it in French, but it's called In the Solitude of Cotton Fields. It's a very trippy play. It's two characters. One is called the dealer. The other one is called the client. And they kind of meet in a no man's land. And the play is just like alternating monologues, where it essentially starts out where the dealer says to this person that he's with whom he's crossed paths, he says, "Hey, essentially, I see you, and I know that if you're here at this hour and in this place, that you must be looking for something, right? And so tell me what it is that you're looking for, because I have whatever it is you want, whatever you can imagine wanting, even whatever you don't even know that you want, I have it. So all you have to do is ask." And then the other character replies, "Actually, no, I'm just happen to be passing by. But if you're offering something, how about you show me what it is that you have to offer, and then maybe I'll pick some, maybe I'll choose something, maybe I'll accept your offer, maybe not." And they basically just can never agree. But each line, it's like alternating monologues of like 3 or 4 pages or something, and they just come to blows at the end because they just really can't agree on this basic principle, like who wants what, draw first,
Yeah.
It's a great play. I mean, it's very poetic and philosophical, and just sort of about the impossibility of connection and the sort of loneliness of the human condition. Yeah. So and I'm doing that at the Avignon Festival. So And I would say that that's like kind of pretty representative of
Okay.
the kind of stuff that I've been doing. Not the rap so much, that's new for me.
Yeah.
And
these venues you're working in, well, one you said was interactive, but are they intimate theaters? Are they mid-size? Are they large theaters? What kind of?
So the public execution or a trade show, that's for the street. So there's a very vibrant street theater scene in France. Basically, the street theater season is from April to October. There are like a ton of festivals, and then there are just, you know, towns and cities that will, you know, put on a few days of street theater, I don't know, now and then, and so they'll call in companies to do something. And this is actually kind of a first for me, the street theater. It's not a world I'm that familiar with. I've done performance in like public spaces before, but since this is like in a street theater festival, I haven't really experienced that yet. But so this is the idea, because it's like a trade show, kind of like a market. Like there's like these stands, and there are what do you call them? You know, those people who like try to sell you stuff in a market. I forget what the English word for that is. In French, you say bonimenteur. So that's made to be done outdoors. The piece I'm doing in Naples, but which will almost certainly reprise here and hopefully all over Europe, who knows, can be done in a theater. We're doing it in Naples, we're doing it in a museum, as I was saying, the Fashion Museum.
Okay.
What's really exciting about that, one of the things I really like about it, is it's conceived of as like it's almost like an exhibition slash performance. So because there's also there are these photographs by a photographer that my director works with a lot. So there's sort of like a photography exhibit. The idea is that people can kind of come and go, almost like going to a museum.
Yeah.
Okay. So for example, we'll be performing like the piece, the sort of exhibit will be open from, let's say, like 2 p.m, and then maybe we'll be performing from like 7 to 10, but it's completely open. There's no seating. It's kind of and I think and so it's really conceived more for like that kind of space. Than, although we can do it, we've rehearsed in like more kind of traditional theaters where people would sit down and look at a stage. But but I like it better when people are free to move around, and are free to also like not pay attention, or pay attention to one thing and not, you know, not necessarily pay attention to what we think they should be paying attention to. The KOLTES play is in the theater, just like a straight up theater, a small one. I think it's in Avignon. Well, the Avignon Festival, there's all kinds of theater sizes, from very small to very big, and also a lot of the sort of historic settings of Avignon is a beautiful medieval city. So for the festival, you know, they're like cloisters. There's the old papal palace, the courtyard that's taken over. So and then there are a lot of small theaters, or even places that are converted into theaters for the festival. I think kind of like at Edinburgh at the Fringe Festival, it's like the same kind of scene.
Right.
Yeah.
Super. Paul Spera, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Stephen.
Next week, we're joined by ALICIA LAGUNA. Since 1993, ALICIA has been the artistic co-director of Mexico City's Teatro LINEA de SOMBRA, or the Shadow Line Theatre. With them, she's been a company actress and creator of plays addressing the context of Mexico's socio-political reality for almost 30 years. In that time, Teatro Linea de Sombra has toured Europe, South America, Canada, the United States, Korea, China, and Russia.